Hi, my name's Phil Gardner and welcome to Fun with Boxes. Well, today this is going to be purely a how to play video because this video has taken quite some time to edit, I believe, and it could be one of the longer videos that I've done. So rather than give you my final thoughts at the end and do any stop motion unboxing, I thought it better just to crack on with the how to play Deep Regrets. An absolutely cracking and interesting game. Okay, to set up the game, let's first look at the player setup. And each player will select an angler board and place that board in front of them, either side up. They have this rather humorous, scary looking artwork on one side and, well, equally scary looking artwork on the other side too, if I'm honest. All these angler boards are identical and identical on the back, only the artwork and name is different there. And on each of these boards you'll have a space for trophies to be mounted. You'll have a space to track your money in the game, a place for your fresh dice and spent dice, and then a space at the bottom for your rods and reels then. So I'm setting up a two-player game, so we'll pick these two characters. Give each player a fish buck tracker, and that's where you would track your fish bucks, your money, and place that onto the zero space there. Then each player would get their 3 dice of their colour. These are the player dice. And these are placed into the spent area of the board. Each player receives a can of worms card, and each player receives a lifeboat card. Each player will also get a boat and a madness marker. There are also some player reference cards included with the game, so make sure that each player has got 2 of the reference cards. Finally, we need to pick the first player, and the player who has had the most regrettable day, they will take the first player token, which is this anchor. Okay, that's our players sorted. Let's now look at the port setup. Well, firstly, we take the port board and set that up at the end of the table. Then we take our day marker and place it onto the Monday on the day tracker. And for a normal game, you would place it on the Monday, but if you wanted a shorter game, you would place it on the Tuesday. Next, you will take all the tackle dice, and these are the sort of like pale wooden looking dice, and you would pop them into the bag and keep that in reach of all players. Next, we take all the regret cards, which are these small cards, and these will have regret values on the back of them and a little humorous description of what you are regretting that you may have done. And you would take all these, give these a good old shuffle, and then you would take 10 cards per player. So I'm setting up a 2-player game. So I've got 20 cards and the rest of them can go back into the box. These cards are then placed in a deck next to the port board in the regret supply. Next we take the rod cards, the rod item cards. Again, give these a good shuffle and pop these into or next to the rod shop. Do the same with the reel, and again the same with the supply cards. Again, giving them a good shuffle and popping them next to the supply shop. You would also take and keep close by the life preserver token, the fish coin, which is a lovely double-sided fish coin there with heads on one side and tails on the other, as you would expect, and the red omen die, and keep that close by as well. Now you'll also need to set up the madness tracker nearby. Here we have the Ocean Madness tracker, and we would place each player's tracker cube into the top slot 0. Now this you will use to actively track your madness as you play the game, updating these tracks as and when you need to. And this is all based on your regret cards. At the start of the game, no one has any regret cards, so the cubes are at the 0 level. And what this indicates is the values of certain types of fish and the maximum number of dice you can have in your fresh area on your player board. So at the beginning of the game, our fair value cards are going to be worth plus 2 points. 2 points more than their value shown on their cards, whereas the foul value cards are reduced by 2. And the most dice we can have in our fresh part of our player board is currently 4. Now, the more regret that we build, this will mean that, for example, if I have 1 to 3 regret cards, my cube will drop down here, and now my fair and foul value are plus 1, minus 1, but I can now have 5 maximum dice. And if you go to the extremes here, well, 13 or more regret cards will give you a discount at the port, and your fair will be minus 2 and your foul plus 2, and you've got a whopping 8 dice to use in your fresh area. And the final part of setup is the C setup, and you would place the C board beside the port board. Next you will take the small dink cards, give these a good old shuffle and pop these into the dink area of the board. Next you would take all the level 1 depth cards, and again, of course, give these a good old shuffle, and then you will be creating piles, 3 piles of 13 cards. And then you would do the same for the depth level 2 cards. Again, give them a good shuffle and create 3 piles of 13 cards. And you guessed it, we do the same then finally with the depth 3 cards. And you will notice we have some space here for discarding the fish cards there. And on the left hand side, this is where we will place our ships. Now, players always start the game at sea. So we would place all the players' ships here at depth 1. And there you have it, that's the setup complete. Now, before we go into exactly how to play the game, let's first take a look at some of the fish cards. So here we have some random fish cards. So in the top left hand corner, here is the value of the fish, both for selling the fish at the port and for scoring at the end of the game. But do not forget that the fish value is affected by the madness level, but can never go below 0. So for example, for me, my fair value is plus 1 and my foul value is just at 0, just equals what the card is. So in this example, my hammerhead shark is large and fair, so its value of 5 is increased by 1, so this is actually worth 6 points. Next we have the name of the fish. Now the top right hand side, this is how hard the fish is to catch. So when fishing you must spend dice equal to or greater than the fish's difficulty in order to catch it. Now there will be things that can mitigate or reduce that level or have an impact on how hard a fish is, but we'll come on to that later. Next we have the size and type underneath the name there, and it could be large, small or middling. And again, the fish are either going to be fair or foul. Now there is a cell effect here, which is highlighted in red there, underneath the foul fish. Now all foul fish will cause you to draw 1 regret card when you sell them. Now at the bottom of each card are some various abilities, and these abilities are persistent, reveal, catch, or eat abilities. Finally, right at the bottom of the card is just a little bit of lore, a little bit of fun in the game. That doesn't affect gameplay at all. Now, when we're talking about fish abilities, you will have some persistent abilities that are always in effect so long as that fish has been revealed. Now, there is a revealed ability as well, and these abilities resolve immediately as soon as you reveal a fish. So, for example, Scrat here, if you don't catch Scrat when you reveal it, you have to give it to the player on your right. So if you couldn't afford perhaps to catch Scrat, then instead you would have to give it to the player sat on your right. Next is the catch abilities, and these abilities resolve immediately when a fish is caught. So for example, Hammerhead Shark here, as soon as I catch him, as soon as I pay my dice value to catch him, then I would have to discard one small fish if I had one. Finally, there is the eat ability on some of the fish. Now these abilities can be used during your turn by discarding that fish and then doing what it says on the card. Now it's not just always fish, there will be other things you'll be pulling out to the sea, such as this treasure chest. And what you would do as soon as you do that, you've got the when caught ability, you would activate that, and in this case this is telling me I can discard 3 regret cards and earn 8 money. And then I would take the top 3 cards of the supply deck as well, and then discard this treasure chest. Now I did mention regret cards, and they come with a 0, a trivial regret, a 1, a nagging regret, a 2 value, which is a heavy regret, and finally, of course, a 3 value, which is a deep regret. Now, the values are only used at the end of the game. What you want to keep an eye on is the number of regret cards that you've got at any time during the game. And when you take a regret card for whatever reason, you draw it from the pile, you can take a look at it, but then you keep it face down in front of you. So with these cards, I've got 4 regret cards at the moment. So I would make sure that my cube is on the right level, so 4 to 6 here. Now, as I gain or lose cards during the gameplay, you may find yourself actually recovering your madness, or you could in fact be getting more and more regret and going more and more insane. So you just need to make sure you keep an eye on the number of regret cards you've got and make sure you adjust the position on the madness track. Okay, so with that, let's have a look at how you play this game. Now, each day is played in 4 phases, and you start with phase 1, start, then phase 2, refresh, then phase 3, declaration, and then finally phase 4, which is the main actions of that day. Now, phase 1 is skipped on your first day, and phase 3 is also skipped on your first day. So it's Monday, it's our first game, so we skip the start phase and we go straight to phase 2, refresh. And now this is where you muster your courage, and all players will take all the dice from the spent pool, add in any number of dice from the fresh pool, and then roll them. And then you choose the dice to place into your fresh pool until you hit the max dice limit. So our limit is 4 dice at the start of the game, but we only start with 3. Now, if you did happen to have more dice than your max dice limit, then any remaining dice, you'd place them into your spent area. So all players at the very start will take their 3 dice, give these a roll, and pop these into your fresh area. And now we will check to see who gets thrown the life preserver. And the player who has the highest total of fresh dice values, they take the life preserver and give it to another player of their choice. So I have a higher value, I have 6, whilst this player has 4. So I would take the life preserver and give it to this player. Now, if there was a tie, the player who is earliest in turn order would take this and give this to a player of their choice. Now, the life preserver may be used by the player once during a day, and at sea they can use it to reduce the fishing cost by 2. Or, if they were at port, they could reduce the cost of something by 2. And that's a single use. Once they've used it, they return it. Now phase 3 declaration is skipped on the first turn, and then we go straight into the actions. So let's take a look at what possible actions we have in the game. Well, at the start of the game, we only have the sea actions because our boat is at sea. So let's take a look at the sea actions. Now, on your turn, you may fish or abandon ship. So let's just take a look at how to fish first. Now, in order to take the fish action, you need to have at least one fresh die available, and that's regardless of any items or abilities. So very important, in order to perform the fish action, you need to have at least one fresh dice. The first part of fishing is you are going to cast. Here we are at depth 1, and these are the 3 shoals available to us at this level. And in order to cast, what you would do is you would select one of the 3 shoals at your current depth or above. So if you were further down here at depth 2, you could select either depth 2 or depth 1. But we start the game here at depth 1. So I could pick either one of these shoals. So for example, let me select this shoal here, and if there are no face up fish, then what I would do is reveal the card. So there's a sockeye salmon. Now, the first thing you need to do when you reveal a fish card is to see if it has any reveal abilities on it. Now, this fish doesn't, so we can carry on with the next steps. Now we need to check the fish's difficulty in the top right hand corner, and this fish has got a difficulty of 1. So in order to catch this fish, I must spend dice equal to or greater than the fish's difficulty. So it's got a difficulty of 1, so I can take my 1 dice here and spend that, move it over into the spent area, and then I get to take this fish into my hand. Now, this fish does have a bite ability that I can use anytime during the fishing turn, but I'm going to put this card into my hand. Now, when you're paying for catching the fish, you don't get any change, as it were, from the dice you spent. So if that had been, for example, a value 4 fish, and I had these dice in my fresh thing, I would have to use all 5 points of it. I will not get any change. All 5 are gone into getting that 4 rated fish. Now, it could well be that you may not want to catch that fish. You might not be able to afford it, or you choose not to pay for it. Now, in that case, you have to spend 1 of your fresh die, and it can be of any value, and you would move that to spent, and you would draw the top card from the Dink card deck and keep this hidden from other players then. And this, I would have found an odd ring, which gives me a certain ability there. Now, in my example, I am going to catch this fish, and I have spent 1 of my die. Now, the other thing I need to watch out for is if it has a catch ability on it. Then if it did, I would have to resolve that ability immediately. But it just has a bite ability, so I'm going to put that into my hand, and I can use this card at any point in the future for its bite ability. Now, you may encounter some fish that simply cannot be caught, are discarded after a triggered effect, or are given to other players when revealed. With each fishing action, you may only try to catch 1 fish. No matter the outcome, then your turn ends. Now, something very important to point out here. If a fish has no printed cost, or its cost is 0, or an item or ability reduces its cost to 0, then you do not need to spend any dice in order to catch it. So if I'd managed to get this cost down to 0 by an ability, then I wouldn't have had to use my dice to spend to get it. Don't forget, in order to go fishing, you have to have at least one die in your fresh area. Now, one thing to note around overfishing, if you ever catch the last fish in the shoal, you immediately draw one regret card, and then players can no longer fish from that shoal. And if the sea ever becomes empty, then the game will end immediately. Now, if I had decided not to take that card and instead spent one die to take a dink card, then that fish will remain face up until the start of the next day. Now, I did mention there are 2 sea actions, and the second action you can take is abandon ship. Now, you can only do this once per game. So if you are at sea and your lifeboat is face up, like it is here, then as an action you can flip over your lifeboat to immediately return to port. And you would move your boat onto the port board. And then you would follow the procedure for making port, and then you can only take port actions for the rest of that day. Now, this is a rather drastic action that you may need to consider as you play the game, but this is going to count as 10 points of regret. 10 monstrous regret points at the end of the game. Now, this doesn't count as a regret card for when you're looking at your madness level. This is only used at the end of the game to add 10 points to your regret total. Along with those 2 main actions, your main sea actions, there are a number of free actions that you can do at any point during your turn, and they do not count as an action. So the first one is drop sinkers. Before fishing, you may spend a die of any value. Move that over to there. And you can move your boat down 1 depth. And you could spend another die and move your boat down a second time. Now, your boat will remain at its depth until the start of the next day, where it would automatically move back up 1 depth. Now, everyone has a can of worms. So, whilst fishing, before you reveal the card, what you can do is you can use your can of worms to take a peek at the card before you decide to catch it. So what I could do is flip my worm card over and take a little peek at this card. And it's a mermaid. So I can decide now what I want to do with this. Now, I can either put it back on top, or I can place it at the bottom of the deck, and then I would carry on fishing as normal. So if I didn't really want this card, I would pop this at the bottom, but then I'm taking a risk of turning this card over, or if I wanted this card, I could leave it there and then turn it over and do any of the revealed actions and then look to pay for its costs. Now, as I mentioned earlier, what you can do is you can eat the fish using the bite action there. You can use that at any stage by discarding the fish card from your hand and taking the actions shown on the cards. Now, of course, during your turn, if you have the life preserver, then you can use it to reduce the fishing cost by 2. And finally, if you have any dink items, you can use these during the fishing turn as well, so long as they are appropriate to that round. And this would be the same here. We have slots for rods and reels, and again, you can use dinks or any items you have. So you could use a dink, you could use your rod ability or your reel ability at any point during your turn, and they are all free actions. Next, let's take a look at the actions we can take while we are at port. So you will get the opportunity to move from the sea and into port, where as soon as you get there, you would make port and you would take these actions as written here. Now, the first thing you would do is, if you had used your worms, you can refresh your worms so you can use them on a future fishing trip. Now, you can also refresh any dice. So that's taking the muster your courage action that we did in phase 2, the refresh phrase. And you would take all the dice from your spent pool and add any number from your fresh, and then roll them and pop them into your fresh. And then the final part there is optional, and that allows you to take a look at one of your regret cards and discard it. and we can do the port actions. So this allows us to visit a shop or sell our fish or mount any fish that we have caught. So let's take a look at the visit shop action. Now these are very straightforward. You will need to have money, of course, to be able to take these actions. And at the start of the game, you won't have any money. So perhaps let's take a look at how we sell fish first, and then we'll have a look at how we shop. Let's say I have these fish, just purely as an example here. Now, looking at these fish here, these are fair fish and these are foul fish. Now, I know that my fair fish values is +2 at the moment on the madness track. So this fish is worth 3, this is worth 3, and this is worth 5. So they'd be very good to sell. They would get me quite a bit of money. Whereas if I chose to sell these fish, which I could do, they have a foul value of -2. So this 4 value would only be worth 2, and this 5 value would only be worth 3. But it's up to you. You can sell any number of fish, but there is a maximum of 10 money that you can have at any time. So perhaps I would simply sell these 2 fish, and they're going to be worth 3 coins each because of the +2 fair fish value. So I could sell them, discard these cards, and slide my money tracker up to 6. Now, one thing to note is if you do sell a foul fish, then pay attention to that icon, because if I sold this fish, I would get the money for it, dependent on the value there. But however, I would have to draw a regret card. So we sold some fish, we've got some money. So what can we do with our money? Well, we could go to the rod shop. Now, we could pay 1 of our money and we could draw 1 rod card from the top and add that to our hand, or we could pay 3 and take the top 3 cards and add 1 to our hand and place the others underneath the cards, or we could pay 5, take the top 5 cards, keep 2 of them and place the remaining ones back underneath. Any of the item cards you discard back under the item deck, including the dinks. It's only the fish cards that are discarded to the graveyard face up. So for example, I could spend 1 and take this card, add it to my hand, and now this is a split bamboo pole. And what this means then is if at the start of my next turn I equip this rod, then small fish will cost 1 less to catch. So that's quite handy. Now, each of the other shops works in a similar manner. So the real shop works exactly the same as the rod shop there. Again, I could pay 1, slide this down and take this, which gives me a stopwatch. Once per day, you may set any 1 fresh die to its highest value, so that'd be quite handy to have as well. And again, this goes into your hand. Now, similar thing with the supply, but slightly different outcomes there. And now we come to what I think is the interesting one, and that is go into the dice shop. And here you will be spending your money to gain some extra dice. Now, these are tackle dice. They look different to the player dice, more of a wooden look to them. And at the dice shop, you can pay 1 to draw 1 die from the bag, or 3 to draw 2, or 5 to draw 3. So, for example, I could pay 3 there and draw 2 dice out of the dice shop bag, and I would take these die and I would immediately roll any I've purchased and pop these into the fresh area of my board. Now, I do have to pay attention to my max dice value, which is only 4. So what I would need to do is I can only have 4 fresh die there, so I can move 1 into the spent area. Now, one important thing to know about the tackle dice is whenever you spend 1 to do some form of action, then it doesn't go into the spent pool. Instead, it goes back into the bag. Now, if any effect moved a tackle die into spent, then that's not classed as spending. So that die will remain there. It's not put back into the bag. It's only put back into the bag if you spend it. So they are the shops. The final thing you can do is mount fish. So again, let's imagine we have these cards in my hand. Now, what you can do, you can choose up to 3 fish from your hand and simply mount them into any empty slot at the top of your angler board. So, for example, I could choose to mount this 5 value fish and perhaps this 3 value fish. Now, once you've mounted a fish, you cannot remove it, and you can only have 1 fish per slot. And at the end of the game, these are going to score you points based on their value as modified by the madness times by the multiplier that they mounted to. However, at the end of the game, the player with the highest regret value is going to lose 1 of their mounted fish. So you want to be careful here of how much regret you are gaining, because if you end the game with the most points of regret, then you're going to lose 1 of your fish. Now again, as is with the fish action, there are a couple of free actions you can take at port. Now the first free action is, if you have the life preserver, you can use it to reduce the cost of shopping by 2, and you can also use any dink cards you've got that are relevant as well. And they are your 2 free actions. Now there's one final thing that you can do at the end of phase 4, the action phase, and that is you can choose to pass. Now when a player first passes, and each time they are skipped in the turn order, they may either draw a dink card or discard 1 random regret card. So rather than take an action, a player can instead choose to pass. And as a reward then, they'll either gain a dink card or they can discard a random regret card. Now, once all but 1 player has passed, so there's 1 player left who hasn't passed, they may take 2 more turns, and then the day will end immediately after their final turn, and they will get no passing rewards, and then play will proceed to the next day. If I just talk very briefly about regrets. When an ability or an effect requires you to draw 1, you take 1 from the top of the regrets draw pile. You look at it in secret and you place it face down in front of you. But if the draw pile is empty, then you must draw from the discard pile instead. And if the discard pile is empty, then you must choose another player and take a random regret card from them. Now when you have to discard a regret, then you select 1 and place it on top of the discard pile face down. And if an effect or ability causes multiple players to draw or discard regrets all at the same time, you resolve all of these starting with the first player and then proceeding in turn order. So before we look at the end game and what we need to do there and how we score, let's go back to the main phases of the game. So imagine we played our first day of Monday and now we are about to start Tuesday. So let's go through the 4-day phases again. Phase 1, start. Now we skipped this on the first day. This is the second day now. So what we would do is we move our day marker and pass the first player token clockwise around the table. This is the first player token. We would pass that. We would then discard any cards that are revealed in the sea. Here are the discard piles. I don't have the space here, I'm sorry. But you would discard them here. You would trigger any effects that are listed underneath the day. Now there's no effects on Monday and Tuesday, but on Wednesday and Friday all players can flip their can of worm cards face up. On Thursday it's payday and all players gain 3 money. Don't forget, the most you can have is 10. And then on Saturday all players would take an orange die from the bag. And if there weren't enough available, all players would take 1 green die instead. And if there still weren't enough available, then all players would take 1 blue die instead. And then we would reel in. And then all the players who are at sea, if they are not at depth 1, they have to move 1 level up towards depth 1. Then we do phase 2, which is refresh, that we've already talked about. And then we do phase 3, which is our declaration. Now again, we skip this on the first day. So the first thing we do is set our bearings. And starting with the first player and proceeding clockwise, each player declares whether they will spend the day at sea or port by placing their boat in the appropriate location. Now, players who were at port on a previous day must return to the sea at depth 1. And then you can equip rod and reel. So if you have purchased a rod or a reel during your turn, then you'll be able to equip one rod and or one reel to your player board to take with you when you go fishing. And then we move to phase 4, which is the actions. And then we carry on performing the actions, or whether we're at port or whether we're at sea. So at the end of the game, well, the game will end on the final day once all players have passed. And this is where you have to deal with the regrets. So everyone counts up the value of the regret cards they've got. Don't forget to add 10 if they flipped over the lifeboat. And the player or players with the highest total regret value must discard a fish according to the player count. Now, if it was 2 players, you would have to discard your lowest value mounted fish. But if there was 3 or more players, you have to discard your highest value mounted fish. Now, one thing to note here, because it's quite easy to overlook, is when we are looking at what fish to discard according to the player count, you do not look just at the value printed on the fish. You have to make sure you have calculated its value dependent on where your madness tracker is. So whenever you're choosing which card, either the lowest value mounted fish or the highest value mounted fish, always make sure you adjust the card value with the current level of your madness tracker. And then you count up your scores. And this is very straightforward. All fish that are in your hand are scored for their printed value, modified of course by your current level on the madness tracker. Mounted fish, they scored their value, first modified by your current level on the madness tracker, and then multiplied by the mount modifier, either times 2 or times 3. And finally, for all the money you've got, which they call fish bucks, every 2 fish bucks you have at the end of the game, you will score 1 point. And then, once players have totaled their scores, the player with the higher score wins. And in the case of a tie, the player with the lower total regret value wins. If they're still tied, then the player with the fewer regret cards wins. And if they're still tied, well, you just tie. And that's how you play a game of deep regrets. Well, there you go. Thanks so much for watching. I do hope that you found this video interesting and helpful. Most importantly is I hope that you found it helpful. And if you did enjoy the video, please consider hitting the old like button and also hit that subscribe button too, if you would be so kind, because that would really help to grow the channel. And in the meantime, thanks so much for watching. Please do take care, and bye for now.